The agenda this week: survey the damage in Palmyra, Syria, assess the challenge facing opposition parties in Ontario, heard from Michael Coren on his epiphany on marriage equality, and considered hurdles that women face in making the transition from actor to director with Helen Shaver. The agenda's Week in Review begins with the troubling matter of food fraud.
We've been working to describe species over the last 250 years. Since Linnaeus and Darwin, we've described about 1.7 million species using traditional approaches. We don't know how many species we share our planet with, but in the last 5 years, we've cataloged 5 million specimens from 500,000 species. So we've got a long ways to go, but we can do this in a much more rapid way by using this digital DNA-based identification system coupled with an informatics platform to share that information. We think probably 2 to 3 decades. With a concerted effort from researchers around the world, we can build that catalog of life.
And as we segue into a discussion about food fraud, how does what you're doing connect to that?
That's an excellent question, and it was one that took me a bit by surprise. So my initial role in the barcode research program was to help coordinate building the barcode library for fishes. So we've been working with colleagues around the world to genetically profile the different species of fishes, and along the way, one of my former graduate students said, I wonder if our database is getting mature enough that if we went out into the marketplace and just bought fish, if we could actually get a species level ID on it. And what we found at that time was that, yes, we could put a species level ID on everything we had tested. Our database was maturing, but what we weren't prepared for was the fact that about 1 in 4 of the fillets that we tested were mislabeled. Always a species of a lower economic value being substituted in for one of a higher value. This is a form of food fraud.
Well, okay, the perfect segue to the next. Sylvain, give us, that's a good specific example of what food fraud is. How widespread do you think it is out there?
We don't know for sure. What we kind of know is that there are areas in the world where it's worse than others. And I would say that Europe right now, it's a very difficult place. There's lots of counterfeiting going on just because of the fact there's Eastern Europe and Western Europe. There's lots of exchanges going on there. And I spent a year last year in Austria looking at this issue, and there's a big problem there. In Italy, northern Italy, in Germany, in Bulgaria, Romania, there are problems. The horse meat scandal back in 2012 really pointed to that problem.
What was that scandal?
Well, essentially, you had Tesco, a major British retailer. It found out that actually instead of beef in its lasagna, under its private label, they found actually horse meat instead. And of course, in England, eating horse doesn't really go well. And so it was a big problem, a big scandal. And it took months to understand where the problem actually was. And they figured out that there are tons of people within the food system that actually they buy and sell products without even seeing it or touching it ever.
Well, this is what I'm wondering. You're convinced this is not a case of sort of carelessness or just not knowing. This is intentional fraud. Somebody's intending that it's product A, but in fact, they know it's product B.
This is what we call economically motivated adulteration in our language, okay?
Economically motivated adulteration.
Okay. There's an economic purpose to this kind of behavior, obviously. But what the real problem is that there are many, many agents, brokers, restaurants that are involved in the food system that aren't aware that they're actually selling products that have been counterfeited. That's the real issue.
Is this something you have dealt with in the past?
Yes, for sure this is a real thing. I have actually previously just understood it as greenwashing, right? Because there's people telling you that things are from local farms, and when they're really not, they're actually imported thing, or specifically around the way animals get raised, right? There's so many different criteria that people just sort of tell you one thing. They say things are naturally raised, which actually means nothing, right? And cage freeness around eggs and birds is not the only criteria that we need to know about to be confident that we're buying well-raised chickens and eggs. So we see it all the time, and I'm constantly pushing suppliers, asking more questions about farms, about about growing practices, all of that, just to see how serious and legitimate they actually are.
And in your experience, do you think you have been on the receiving end of, what did you call it again? That's some kind of adulteration?
Economically motivated adulteration. 100%.
You've been on the receiving end of
Oh,
that.
for sure.
For what kind of product?
All sorts of things. There was bacon once. There were berries. Somebody tried to tell me that there were Ontario strawberries completely out of season, but they were standing on, you know what I mean? They were convinced that they had some special access to some special growing, I don't know what, how they were saying that, Mother Nature had offered them some special opportunity. But I see it very frequently.
Huh. Jamie, how about you? Do you run into this in your life?
Yes, but I'm interested in the impact that food fraud would have on sustainability and the cost of food and the real cost of food. I think that's really the issue. As we become more involved with local food procurement practices, this kind of dialogue that we can have with people in our local areas that produce food for us, I think we can identify what's going on, and there's a more of a trustworthy relationship going on there, where we actually do see and touch the food and understand where it came from, more than if we're looking at more of a global model where it's buyer beware.
Well, I get why trust is an issue. Obviously, if you think you're buying grade A steak and it's actually horse meat, there's a problem there. But if you're the consumer and you can't tell the difference, is this a problem?
Yeah, I'll go back to buyer beware. So is this how we need to approach all of our purchasing when we walk into a store? We kind of go, ugh. So I would welcome something like an identification model with using some kind of technology that would allow me to trace, to actually point an object. Sylvain, I know that you have been talking about this. What does that thing look like? You said it wasn't an app. What is it?
Well, it's in development. There are several, as a result of the horse meat scandal in Europe, there are several universities in Europe that are actually looking at developing a portable technology that would empower the consumer at retail.
First, let's establish off the top as we take a look and situate Palmyra or Palmyra on the map. I've heard it pronounced both ways. That it once served as a Silk Road caravan trader's paradise. It has been described as one of the most important cultural centers of the ancient world. And in 1980, the ruins of this city were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Why did UNESCO give it that designation?
It is one of the most important centers of the ancient world. It was at the crossroad of different cultures. It's an oasis city, which was a merchant place between the East and the West. It has influences of the Greco-Roman cultures, but also local influences and influences from the Persian culture. So it was very important to include this site on UNESCO's World Heritage List.
And how big a tourist attraction was it before all the violence took place?
It was quite a tourist attraction. Many of my friends have visited the site in these times. There was a city, the city of Palmyra, with 50,000 inhabitants, and mostly they lived on the economy of the World Heritage Site.
Now, ISIS took control after it began its attack on Palmyra back in 2015, May of 2015. I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osman, to bring up a picture of some young boys they recruited performing a mass execution of 25 Syrian army soldiers in front of Palmyra's amphitheater. There's that picture from last year. Let's first do a series of questions here. Who was Khalid al-Assad?
That was our former director at the World Heritage Site of Palmyra, and he was killed by Daesh at the site. Actually, when I went just recently, I met with his son-in-law.
How old was he?
He was above 80 years old, and it was for us a terrible situation, but it was also a terrible situation for all the people working in heritage conservation around the world.
Dr. Ressler, why did they kill him?
This escapes all of us. We cannot imagine how they can kill an old man who was passionate about heritage and passionate about protection and wanted to stay in Palmyra to save the site.
Do we know how they killed him?
Yes, but I spare you the details.
Okay, thank you for that. Let us now share some pictures that you have seen before with our viewers here, because of course not only did they kill him, but they also destroyed some very ancient structures, and we're going to show some pictures. Here is the temple of Baal Shamin, Palmyra's second most important religious shrine. It was built in 17 AD. Let's show another picture now that shows us the extent of the damage to the temple of Bel, which had been described as the most significant building in Syria from the Roman period. That one also 2,000 years old. Now another one. Here's what remains of the Arch of Triumph. And a look at the state of the Palmyra Museum. That's one artifact there. And then if we go in and take a look inside the museum, yes, a complete mess. They really had their way with the place. Now, in March of this year, the Syrian army, with the help of the Russian Air Force, retook the area. And you were there on the ground a few weeks ago to assess the damage. How bad is it?
The damage is quite serious in terms of the Palmyra Museum, because we didn't know before we did the assessment on the ground how serious it was. However, one has to say that the movable objects to a great extent were brought to safety just before, actually, but two people of the DGIM, which means the Department of Antiquities, were hurt during the removal of these objects, but they were also very much in a hurry just before Daesh came, and the last room of the museum could not be fully evacuated. Also, the big statues could not be evacuated. They were just too heavy, and maybe you remember at the entrance of the museum there was the so-called lion statue, which was also damaged. Mostly Daesh cut off the heads of some of the objects, or the faces of some of the objects, and the museum was severely damaged because a bomb fell through the roof and went into the basement, which means into the storage area of the museum. So this is full of rubbles. The second area we evaluated was the situation on the World Heritage Site, which means in the archaeological site, and you just showed the pictures where we also evaluated the damages. We have to go on a case-by-case basis. You showed the picture of the Triumphal Arch. What we can do there, the pieces are still there on the ground. I discussed with Mamoun Abdelkarim, who is the director of the DGIM, of the Department of Antiquities, that this can be put together because the pieces are there. It looks more serious for the temple of Baal Shamin. You have also shown pictures because in one word, it's pulverized. So we cannot guarantee that a rebuilding can be envisaged there, but we will discuss this further. When we could access that area, I could see from directly in front of the Triumphal Arch, I could see and assess the damage, whereas for the temple of Baal Shamin, we could not access the area because, contrary to what is said in the press, the demining is not completed. So Russian teams are still demining. They have demined about 3,000 mines already in the area, but there are still booby traps and other devices, and it's quite complicated to do that in the archaeological zone.
Janet, your turn. We go after your guys right now.
The Liberals?
No, they're in power, Janet. We're going after the other opposition party. And shall we hear from the leader of the official opposition right now? Here's Patrick Brown. Roll clip. But again, as we think about what the PC party under Patrick Brown is all about, are you still the party of tax cuts?
Well, you know, if Ontario was in a position where we can afford tax cuts, I would love to limit the burden that government has on businesses, on people. It's one of the reasons that the proposal we came out with on cap and trade was that every cent raised from cap and trade would go back in tax relief. I guess the type of conservative I would describe myself is that I believe in fiscal responsibility, but I also believe that we have a duty to protect the social infrastructure of the province, and that means the environment, that means healthcare, it means education.
Janet, I found that answer fascinating because I suspect if I'd asked any common sense revolutionary, is the PC party of Ontario the tax cut party still, they'd have all said, yep. And he didn't say that. He said, well, if we can afford it. And he's moving away from some of the other positions that the PC party has had over the past 20 years as well. What's going on with him?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I think what you're seeing is a new opposition leader who will be evolving, is evolving, and I think we'll see where he ends up, if you will. I think what he's been doing, because when he first came in, there was a perception that he might be, some sort of hard right, Neanderthal, social conservative, I mean, all those wonderful buzzwords that people were trying to apply to him. And I think what you've seen him be doing sort of very tactically is making sure he's not stumbling into those kinds of issues. There was a bit of a misstep with the McLaren issue, I think, over the last couple of weeks. But I think largely he's done a reasonably good job of trying to not get boxed. What I think he now has to do is, so what is the narrative that ties his positions together or will tie his positions together? And for example, you're quite right. I think Mike Harris probably would have said without a moment's hesitation, yeah, we're the party of tax cuts. Yeah. And I think what you're seeing is he's trying to be, again, it's a different circumstance too, trying to be a little more nuanced about it, and we'll see where he ends up on it.
Does that make him a more formidable opponent for your party?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Patrick Brown is a guy who is preparing himself to win an election. And he is shedding the, I think, burden of being a party driven by ideology. There is no ideology left in him. He's driving right down the middle of the road, and he's not going to swerve right or left. If I were his political advisor, I would say you're right on the right track, because you have to remember, in 9 elections out of 10, opposition parties do not win. Governments lose. They get thrown out. Mike Harris or Ernie Eves got thrown out. Stephen Harper got thrown out. Brian Mulroney got thrown out. And
Sort of.
Well,
he actually wasn't there anymore.
He wasn't there, nor was Mike Harris. But the party got thrown out. People get tired of the party. The challenge for Patrick Brown is simply to present a persona and a party that looks like it's capable of governing within the broad complex of issues and cultural diversity of the province to look like an acceptable alternative.
Well, the other thing, I was just going to say, and the other thing that Patrick is doing and doing really well, and he's certainly proved in the leadership race. I mean, because Christine Elliott was supposed to be the front runner and supposed to win and whatever, and he out-organized her on any level you want to mention.
At every level.
At every level. And I mean, he's an incredible workaholic. He understands the importance of riding by riding organization, big time. So he's out there doing that. But the second thing that he brought into this, which is something that I think people didn't anticipate, is that he has ties in many of the multicultural communities that will be and prove during the leadership, and will prove, I think, very valuable if he can keep building that base as he goes forward. So again, many times for an opposition leader, it's like watching an iceberg, right? Like most of the stuff that really matters is what's happening under the water, and you're only sort of seeing the tip. So so he has there's a lot of fundamentals there that might do him in very, very good stead in the next election.
Here's the thing that I'm curious about, which is he may want to run a more pragmatic, less ideological, progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. Will his base follow him?
Well, there's a reason why, I suppose, Tim Hudak and others have run campaigns the way they did the last few elections. And but I would say that, to Greg's point, this is an opportunity Patrick Brown has here to prove himself that he has bigger, broader reach. I think the really interesting actual question here, though, is how this affects Kathleen Wynne and Andrea Horwath, because the Liberals essentially in the last couple of campaigns ran strategic voting campaigns in many parts of this province, which actually has kind of limited Liberals to the GTA. I mean, this is a very regionally divided province right now, politically. And so here's an opportunity. If Patrick Brown does hold to middle of the road, and he doesn't get too diverted either way, and he can speak to those more centrist Ontarians, then it also doesn't allow Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals to, I think, scare a lot of potential New Democrat voters. So it provides Andrea Horwath actually with a terrific opportunity going into the next election as well. And she's a far more popular leader than either of the other ones are right now.
I'm not sure that that's the case. I mean, there's just nothing happening, with all due respect. amongst the people that make up the provincial NDP party. I mean, there's just...
What do you mean nothing happened?
Well, there's no news, there's no story, there's no leaked manifesto document. I mean, it's just, there's commentary coming out of question period, but you just don't see any momentum there at all.
And yet, she's riding high in the polls. Patrick Brown's probably biggest issue is that nobody knows him yet.
Well, the most recent
and that'll come.
The most recent
come.
poll, I'm sorry to say because I'm a Liberal, the most recent poll says that Patrick Brown is the most popular leader in Ontario.
Guys, these polls are 2 years before an election.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
Less than relevant.
they don't mean anything, but
Totally
I'm just saying,
irrelevant.
right now, today, there's not a lot happening with the New Democratic Party in Ontario. The Liberals are confronting a huge number of very difficult issues, and Patrick Brown
Many
is
of them
out
of their
there
own
organizing,
creation.
riding by riding.
But these are issues of their own creation. I mean, the Liberals are confronting major issues of their own creation. They managed to surf through the last election because they had Tim Hudak up against them, and they could scare a lot of Ontarians into thinking that there was going to be some, vastly right-wing conservative government potentially coming in. He failed dramatically. This presents, I think, Andrew Horvath with a fantastic opportunity, and I don't think they're so invisible as you think they are. There's a lot of work going on the ground, so we'll see.
I've never been homophobic. And because people oppose equal marriage doesn't mean they're homophobic. Many are, perhaps even most, but it doesn't mean you have to be. But I was raised in the UK from a working class home, and I went to various universities where a lot of my influences were gay men in particular, who were very good to me. Never came on to me. I'm way too ugly, probably. But I mean, it wasn't that. It was they were very supportive and helpful and kind. And I was ungrateful, I suppose, in many ways. And it wasn't an issue for me. But I became this poster boy for conservative Catholicism, particularly after I wrote a book about the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And this was part of the package. And so I became identified with. And I should have said no, but I didn't. I said yes. There's no one to blame apart from me.
And now you say that, quote unquote, this issue is at the epicenter of the modern Christian challenge. The epicenter? How come?
In North America, I think it is. I think it is. Because, as I referred to earlier, we will face a situation, and to a degree we have it now, where the institution that is meant to be the most loving in the world is the only one that stands against full equality for gay people. If we can change this, I don't want this to sound like hyperbole, but if we can change teaching around the gay issue, it'll show that Christians don't have a literal interpretation of Scripture, and it's not meant to be interpreted on a literal basis. We have to use metaphor and understanding. That we can also then judge other aspects of life through that, not liberal, but more intelligent interpretation. And it'll show that Christians and churches can learn and adapt. I've used the phrase recently, the fifth gospel, the gospel of experience. I believe in the creed. I mean, my faith is stronger than ever, deeper than ever. This is a product of my faith. It's not in spite of it, it's because of it. But if we can now show that experience also changes us as Christians, we can become relevant and pertinent to a lot of people who right now are saying, you just don't matter anymore.
So do you think the day is coming in your lifetime or mine where the Catholic Church will marry two gay people?
No. I mean, I left the Catholic Church.
How about the
2 years
Anglican
ago.
Church?
Well, the Anglican Church in the United States does. The Episcopal Church does. The Anglican Church in Canada doesn't. It does accept openly gay clergy, and there's a lot of discussion about the issue, but it won't marry same-sex couples. In our life, the Roman Catholic Church, it's going to be very difficult because it's based on a natural law understanding of theology, and marriage is about procreation. That's not all of it, but a large part of it. I can't see, even under this Pope, the Catholic Church adapting on this issue, or female ordination, maybe married clergy, but that's about as far as they will go, and that'll be a tough one.
Another quote from the book. I'm not really sure if the Bible openly and explicitly supports same-sex love and equal marriage, but I think there's a good argument to say, you tell us, that it does, and an even better argument to say that it doesn't really have an opinion on the subject that applies to the modern world. I am more convinced, you write, however, that it doesn't condemn it and that we've got this one wrong for far too long. Want to just amplify on that somewhat?
Yeah, this is an important point because we don't want to claim too much. Anyone who says the Bible says equal marriage is fine, it's wonderful, that isn't true. There are only about half a dozen references to homosexuality in the Bible, which is a big book. It's bigger than my book. I mean, it's a big book. If someone came from another world, they would say, the Bible, that's all about gay people, isn't it? I mean, it really doesn't mention them very often. The Old Testament never mentions lesbianism. Jesus never mentions homosexuality. And I understand you don't have to mention everything. It can still be an issue, but he does talk about divorce, for example, and lots of other issues.
He's very tough on divorce.
He is.
He's way tougher on divorce than homosexuality.
Well, of course he is. I'm not here to condemn divorce, but I do find it pretty rich when people have been divorced once, twice, or 3 times, get very angry about homosexuality, because maybe they're misreading Scripture. But the essence of the New Testament is love. The quintessence of the life of Jesus is love and acceptance and inclusion. Now, there's a whole chapter about Scripture, and there are passages that I think actually are very gay-friendly, including the life of Jesus and a centurion. But even beyond that, if you don't accept that, it's not an issue of Scripture. The ambiguity is the keynote. And ambiguity should lead us to be indifferent. I don't believe that Christian churches should automatically change overnight. I think they should begin to just dismantle their opposition. It's not a level playing field. If someone goes into a church and says, I'm not sure about gay marriage, or I believe in gay marriage, or I'm gay, they can still lose their job at a college, they can be denied confirmation or communion, they can be far from a teaching position at a school. All sorts of things are still going on. So it's not a level playing field. I'm quite prepared, people who oppose same-sex marriage, of course should be accepted into a church. But what's happening now is people who are for same-sex marriage are being told, in most churches, you don't belong.
I guess one of the things I learned from the book, it's not like formulaic songwriting has never existed. I mean, even the Beatles did verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, I mean, whatever. But these guys have got it down to such a science now, and even to the extent of using fMRI machines so they know exactly what part of the brain you can hit with a particular chorus in order to make it irresistible. Talk about that, if you would.
Yeah, well, I haven't yet to meet the producer who actually has the fMRI machine in the studio. that could be coming next. But certainly there have been a lot of fMRI studies on brains listening to music that show that there are specific parts of the brain that are activated by music. I think what it is, Steve, is, okay, the hook is the part of the song that is the short melodic phrase that often comes at the chorus that really sort of gets your brain's attention. And I think once you've heard that hook 3 or 4 times, the brain sort of commits it to memory and it begins to anticipate it the next time you hear the song. And so even if you don't really like that song, your brain is waiting for that sort of part of the hook that it knows is coming. And then when it does come, there's a feeling of pleasure, a sort of wagging of the cranial tail, as it were, that comes from that particular hook as it hits. And I think that's why these songs become sort of embedded in your brain. And the designers of the songs know that. And so the more hooks you can put into a song, the better. So I think if you compare a Backrack David song like Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head from the 60s, that has a flowing progressive melody that leads you sort of through the song gradually. The songs we're talking about here hit you with a hook right away, and then they keep that hook repeating. So it's not a progressive flowing melody, it's more of a repetitive kind of again and again type of experience.
I do wonder, though, whether you have come to the conclusion, therefore, that what's happening today is worse than what happened in the past. And it's hard to say that because you don't want to sound like a fuddy-duddy. I mean, change is inevitable. But do you think it's worse?
Well, people have complained about mechanized, factory-made songs almost from the beginning of the music industry. In the early 1900s, the same kind of complaints were made about Tin Pan Alley writers, producing these factory-made songs that weren't authentic. So I think it's a bit of a fallacy to fall into the sort of notion that, there was a time when songs came from the heart. Because frankly, we're talking about a very commercial medium, and most songs, there's a famous line that Sammy Kahn said, what comes first, the lyrics or the melody? He said, the phone call, the commission. Right. Yeah. The money is always a prime motivating factor here. But I do think on the lyric side, at least, the quality of the literary nature of songs has definitely declined. I mean, if you love Cole Porter,
I was just going to say,
then you're not going to really get off on Katy Perry because it's just not, double entendre. double entendre used to be necessary because you couldn't talk about sex, right, in a song. But now you can basically talk about what it's really about. So you don't need double entendre, and you don't really need wit and metaphor because maybe people don't even get it anymore. You know?
Well, when we were kids, you know, I Want to Hold Your Hand, right, with the Beatles. And now, I mean, some of the lyrics I read in here about, I mean, they're not even metaphors anymore.
No.
It's blunt. I'm not even going to say it. I mean, apparently you can say it on the radio, but I wouldn't say it on this program because
Right.
it just feels a bit too bawdy. Anyway.
Right. No, that's the thing that's changed, is that all the literary devices that, as a writer, I delighted in listening to songs have basically gone out the window. And it's partly because the people who are writing these songs don't even speak English as a first language.
Well, that's it. Why are they from Sweden and Norway, so many of these
Well,
people?
actually, and in this weird, perverse way, it's an advantage because I think if your English is not your primary language, you tend not to worry so much about wit and metaphor because you don't really think that way. And you actually listen to the sounds of the words as much as you listen to the meaning of the words. And you fit the sounds to the melody, and that seems to augment the power of the hook. You know, it's the words contribute to the sort of overall sonic impact. And if it were too clever, it might actually distract you from that sort of emotional sort of hit that the hook delivers.
So today, when we see, if you look up on the internet because you hear a song and you want to find out, oh, I wonder who wrote that. And if the person who sings the song, if their name is listed in the credits of one of the writers of the song, do we believe it?
It depends. Taylor Swift does write her own words, and she's fairly unique in that regard. Most of them may contribute a few words, but most of them do demand a songwriting credit. It's called change a word, get a third in the business, because, of course, then you get a share of the publishing royalties. And as record sales have declined, the publishing royalties have become more and more valuable. So, yeah, you see the artists listed. But the interesting thing, Steve, is if you look and see, you'll often see 6 or 8 or 10 or even 12 songwriters credited for one song. So this is another big thing that's changed. We've gone from a sort of notion of authorship where there was 1 or 2 authors to basically like a writer's room.
Takes a village.
Yeah, more like television sitcom writing where you have a whole bunch of writers who contribute little bits and pieces. So one writer will write a verse, one writer will write a chorus, one writer will write a bridge, or you'll mix it up between songs. And because of the internet, you can share all this stuff over the internet. And songwriting has always been a very collaborative medium. But I think where we are right now, it's almost moving away from a notion of authorship to this kind of thing that just kind of comes out of the data that's sort of flowing around.
You know, but on the other hand, I mean, and again, I'm going to date myself here, but, you know, I listened to a lot of Al Jolson when I was a kid. Now, Al Jolson never wrote a single song in his life, but he got a songwriting credit on every song he sang. So this is not new. Singers have been trying to hoard in on the writing credit for 100 years, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends on how you view the singer's contribution to the song. The performance of the song is still a huge element in the song, and the vocal. You know, a lot of these songs have, as we said at the beginning, no instruments, except, of course, for the voice. So the voice becomes more important than ever because it's really the only human element in the song.
Have you seen the movie Carol?
I have, yes.
Because
Have you seen the movie Desert Hearts?
Well, of course I have, and that's why I'm bringing this up. Because, you know, I'm exaggerating a little bit when I say you did Carol, but you did it 30 years before Carol.
Before Lesbian Chic or any of the kind of avant-garde, I would say.
And I'm just wondering what kind of a risky role that was to take on 30 years ago when it wasn't quite so mainstream as it is today.
Again, this is one of these things where I read the script and I just thought, what an extraordinary script and what a beautiful love story. And in fact, and this is something that I've just realized, because I was up for, I won an award from this Women International Network a few weeks ago. And in thinking about what I wanted to say, I realized that I was 33 and a half when I did Desert Hearts. And at that time, I had done multiple series. I'd been in big films, little films. I'd been, you know, television, plays, commercials, blah, blah, blah. And I had never, ever worked with a director who was a woman. And anyway, so Donna Deitch was my first female director. And so at the time, I just read the script and thought it was fabulous. My agents and various people said, "Oh, Kellen, I don't think you should do this," because it was, in fact, was risky. But
What did they fear for you?
that I would be stereotyped and identified as a lesbian and stereotyped as thus, I imagine. And just that it was politically way not acceptable, I guess, in those days, right? I mean...
Instead, you got stereotyped as somebody who knows how to act, which is not a bad thing.
It was a great film to do, and a really very eye-opening in many ways, and a great gift. In fact, I met my husband, the father of my child. I only have one, and except for all my imaginary ones. No.
Could a man have directed that picture?
Well, not to the same result.
Not the same way, right?
Right. I don't believe. No, I don't believe to the same result. So that was the first time it was a female writer from a novel written by a woman, directed by a woman, produced by a woman, with 2 women in the lead.
And it made a difference.
Well, it made it what it was, which was a very precious, beautiful little film. And I think Carol is a beautiful, beautiful film, and there are beautiful actors in it, and it looks amazing, and Todd's a great director. I think what we did in Desert Hearts, well, I know that about a year and a half later, there was a Woman of the Year award from GLAAD, and they were giving it to Donna Deitch. And it was in the ballroom at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and Patricia and I were asked to be guests. And as we came onto the stage, this room full of women stood on their feet. Now, I've gotten standing ovations before, and they're very moving. And it feels like it's about you for a minute. This ovation went on long enough for me to realize that it was not about me, but it was about the work, and that we had actually done something to represent a group of people who felt so unrepresented in this human way. And you know, at the time I thought, man, if I never do anything else, I have done one thing that really, really matters.
Here's why your directing is such a big deal. I want to read this out of Variety magazine.
Okay.
It goes like this. Despite all the debate around the lack of opportunities for women, the film industry continues to be dominated by men, new research shows. In 2014, 85% of films had no female directors, 80% had no female writers, 33% had no female producers, 78% had no female editors, and 92% had no female cinematographers, according to the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film at San Diego State University. Why does it apparently seem to be so difficult for women to be represented in these, what have clearly become typically male jobs?
You know, man, I wish I knew the answer. I mean, I think, you know, there's some rudimentary things like people like to hire people they know.
And they know men. Men know men.
Men go, okay, let's go golf. Let's go to Vegas for the weekend. Let's, you know, they might invite me to Vegas for the weekend back in the day, but probably not to discuss film. You know, so I think that's one level, and that's just human nature to a degree. But like with all prejudice, you have to overcome what we have practiced. You have to consciously overcome it. And it is shocking, truly. I mean, and I've spent very little time concentrating on it because I don't think I would ever get out of bed. You know, if you go, oh, well, I got no chance because it's a male-dominated, you know, then just stay in bed. But so I haven't spent a lifetime concentrating on that at all. I've just gotten up and gone and done.
What do you think it'll take to open it up, though?
It's happening. It's happening slowly. It'll be the next generation, I think. You know, my son is 27 years old, and I look at the tribe of his people, his community, and they are so much, on every level, so much more evolved than we are, so much more conscious. They are conscious of these, of these, and they go, what's wrong with you people? Whether it's, you know, same-sex love or transgender or interracial or sexism or even ageism. They're a lot less affected by ageism, which, you know, now at 65, I'm sexism and ageism, they can get me. But seriously, why? It's not. So for me, I've just always placed my concentration on the work and try to, you know, I certainly any young woman who comes to me and says, Helen, how do you, I say, well, follow me, come on, hang out. Well, I don't know what I can do for you, but you can watch, ask me questions, whatever, And I think it is just, you do the work and surround yourself from your own heart with some glory and let them come to you, I guess.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety on our website at tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.